We've had a lot of changes at the agency over the last couple of years, and we've got even more on the horizon. So we're kind of going around doing a kind of a speaking tour with all of our stakeholder groups, trying to get the word out about all the changes we've got coming, and of course to receive any input that you guys have. So just as a little bit of background just about the agency, I mean, obviously you know us from as the folks who license your behavioral health practitioners, but we do a little bit more than that. Altogether, we have 39 different boards and commissions that we administer with 40 different professions. I think altogether we've got something like 270 some odd different license types that we issue, so it's a pretty robust licensure system. On top of that, we do all of the post-licensure functions, so any of your folks that get in trouble, they've got to come from the board. We administer all that as well. Just because of our role with the Board of Pharmacy, we have the Inspect program, which is kind of where we have our most direct input into the drug and opioid epidemic. Inspect program handles all of the state's prescription drug data, and then the Board of Pharmacy is responsible for scheduling all of Indiana's prescription drugs. We also administer the Indiana licensing enterprise. So 15 different divisions of state government have all of their licenses issued through us. And then all that's done just by 107 different full-time employees. And I'm going to apologize real quick for any background noise you might hear. I am on vacation this week, so I'm coming at you from sunny Brooksville, Florida. So if there's any background noise, I apologize. Denise, if you would, next slide. So the PLA is organized into groups. The executive team, our executive director, new executive director is Lindsay Heyer. Then I report to her, and then the rest of the executive team there along. So excuse me, the left side of the slide there reports to me. Also reporting to me, at least for now, are our board directors for our various groups. All of our professions are organized into groups, and there's kind of some cohesiveness between them. I'm seeing now that I highlighted the wrong group for you. Group 8 is the group that does all of the behavioral health and psych licensure for PLA. If you would, next slide, Denise. The way that group is organized, Cindy Vaught is the board director for that group, so she's in charge of it. Reporting to her is Bradley Repass, who does all of the post-licensure stuff for the board. So anytime there's somebody that's got to go for the board, he's the one who's organizing all that. And then Dana Brooks is responsible largely for the pre-licensure function. She's the assistant director, and then reporting to her are 5 licensing analysts. Those 5 licensing analysts are the ones that are doing all of the licensing for your behavioral health professionals. So if you would, next slide. Now we kind of feel it's necessary to address the elephant in the room. You know, PLA's had a lot of challenges here in the last couple of years, and we want to help you guys kind of get the shape of all that. This slide here shows all of the applications that we've received over the last 10 years. And this is for all of our various professions, not just for behavioral health. So you can see, you know, between 12 and 19, there's kind of a bump there in 14, which was we're just adding a large license type. But for the most part, that's going up with population growth. And then you get into 20, 21, 22, and our workload essentially doubles. So that's why the wheels kind of fell off in seeing in the chat. Is everybody able to see the slides?
No. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So the workload essentially doubled for us during the pandemic. And I think that's largely due to a few factors. One is kind of increased reciprocity. Another is the rise of telehealth. We have a lot of interstate practice going on in ways that we didn't, 5, 10 years ago. And then I think critically, a lot of what we're doing in terms of workforce development has really worked. I think people took the time in the pandemic to finish up those last couple of classes and finally get to the point where they're ready for licensure. So that's kind of the root of the issues that we've had over the last few years. If you would, Denise, next slide. So more work didn't necessarily mean more resources for us. So those licensing analysts that do all the licensure work, this is what happened to their workload in 20 and 21. So, they did way more than they were ever, we even thought they were going to have to do. And they rose to the challenge. I mean, these are, if you look at how many licenses they issued, I mean, they almost doubled their productivity during those years, but it still wasn't enough for us to get through the volume that we had. So if you would go to the next slide, please. And like I said, the wheels kind of fell off. So people did not want to necessarily do twice the work for the same amount of pay. And we had a lot of staff turnover. And I'm sorry, there's a truck going by right now. So most of our experienced people left. My apologies, the truck at the end of the driveway. So, most of our experienced staff left, and the ones that were left needed to be trained. We had a lot of turnover even on our new staff. People would kind of show up for their first day, they'd leave for lunch, not come back, that kind of thing. So it was kind of ugly for us for the say last half of 20, most of 21, and beginning of 22. And in terms of our processing speed, that really slowed things down. Last February, February of 22, I pulled our numbers. It took us 31 days between the time somebody hits submit on their application for somebody even to look at it. And that's just the average. So, I mean, sure that there were outliers on either side of that, but the average was that if you submitted an application, no one was going to look at it for 31 days. And if it wasn't complete, it was going to be another 31 days before somebody looked at your supplemental information as well. So in terms of our time to licensure, 84.2 days. So that was unacceptable. And we've done a lot to try and fix that. If you would, next slide. So most critically, we brought on an external call center. We engaged with Navient, the student loan processors. Their workload has decreased as a result of the pandemic. So we brought them in, and they served as kind of our tier 1 call center, handled about 80% of our calls, and transferred through the ones that were, kind of beyond their ability to address themselves. So that returned a lot of processing time to our staff and allowed them to get through the applications that we had sitting. We internally created a temporary strike force of some of our best people. These people, we took them off the phones completely. We cross-trained them on all of our various license types so that anyone who had proficiency to just process through a whole bunch of licensing information in a single sitting, we empowered them to do that. We centralized our training. Usually that's done in the various groups. So by centralizing that, we freed up the groups to spend more time on processing, less time on training. We improved technology across the agency. We've got new call center technology. We've got new hardware, new servers, new got larger screens for licensing analysts, which have allowed them to improve their processing speed. Kind of this reclassification of workers, that is kind of state agency speak for we got them new job titles and a raise. So we did that to address our turnover, keep people sticking around a little longer. In that same vein, we developed career paths for those people so that everybody on their first day with PLA, regardless of where they're starting, we want them to have a path up through the agency into the executive team so they can visualize themselves having a long-term career at PLA. Something that is ongoing, and we really just kind of last week saw some of our first recommendations coming out of this. And I will confess this is on my plate, so it's slow going. We're looking at every single licensing requirement for all of our professions and trying to make recommendations to streamline. And our goal is that we'll be able to roll some of that into our next agency bill for the next session. And then finally, kind of meeting the agency in the middle. It is hugely important for us to get people applying online versus on paper, because the paper stuff, things get lost. It requires additional steps for our agency, our licensing analysts to process them. So the more people we get applying online, the better. And we've kind of taken some steps to make it a little more difficult to apply on paper. So if you would, next slide. I want to touch briefly on our call center. And we talked a little bit about how we engage with Navient. The funding for that ran out last December. So last October, we started transitioning to a new in-house call center. The reason this is important is because prior to engaging with Navient, the phone calls were kind of killing us. So when the number of applications doubled, that of course slowed down the turnaround time within the agency for processing those, which caused people to call in and say, hey, I submitted my stuff, where's my license? So the number of phone calls we had, I think, increased by somewhere around like 80%. And it was just crushing staff. So they didn't have any time. They're spending more time on the phone, less time processing applications. We just kind of ended up in the death spiral of, answering phone calls and not actually doing any real work. So when we engaged with Navient, we instituted a two-tier call center. So all of the kind of easy calls like, hey, can you just confirm that you received my transcript? That kind of thing are handled on the first tier. And then if there's something that's more complicated, it goes through to the second tier. You can get, real information if you need it, and you'll get it from somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. If you've got kind of an easy call, your wait time is going to be much shorter. I think we were up to over an hour for our call times in early 2022. And then once you got through, if nobody in your dedicated group was there to receive your call, then you would get pushed off to a different group that had no idea how to help you. So we put a stop to that. So now you can always call us. There's lesser wait times, and you'll always have available somebody who can help you. And what that did to our staff, if you look at that chart there, it increased our staff's productivity by about 200%. So, almost overnight. It was fantastic. So we realized that even though we were running out of funding for our Navient contract to keep them around, we needed to retain this two-tier model. So what we did is we created an internal call center. We've got 12 people that are answering every single phone call that comes into the agency. They're still kind of in formation. They're not screening calls as effectively as Navient was, but they still are doing a fantastic job of returning time to the licensing analysts to get those licenses out. And with this, we've restructured our call software so that anytime there's a behavioral health call, you'll actually go back to the behavioral health group if you need that level of help. So you won't get somebody from cosmetology that can't help you. All right, if you would, next slide. So with all these changes, we've had some pretty, I'd say, amazing results. Like I said, back last February, we were looking at 84.2 days on average to issue a license. Now we're down to 9.8 days. Now that's, we're really happy with that, but ultimately we can do better. I think that we're going to kind of hit a floor somewhere around 3 or 4 days, just because of that's the average for criminal background checks. But that's where we're driving to. I mean, I think we're in a world where there are people out there we could license same day, and we just need to kind of continue on this path that we're on, and we'll eventually get there. If you would, next slide. What we have kind of going into the next fiscal year, we've got our big budget bill going through the legislature right now. It looks like it's going to sail through, but I'm going to knock on wood because session's not over. So, with that funding, we are going to be doing a whole lot of new things to further improve the agency. Just to explain a few of these as we go through, I've got that ongoing comprehensive requirement review. The behavioral health is kind of the priority because I think it's complicated. There's a lot of kind of like little nits that we've got to think about. So that's where I'm going to be looking first. I did make my first recommendation to the board just 2 weeks ago, where we are going to be eliminating the Indiana jurisprudence exam for our reciprocity license types. So we haven't quite got a timeline for making that happen yet, but it should happen soon. But the remainder of that is likely going to be incorporated into our agency bill for the 24 session. In the next fiscal year, so starting in July, ends in the next June, we will be doing a lot of technology changes. One that I think is going to be real helpful for behavioral health is My License One, which is a new user interface for our licensing software, so that when you log in to apply, you'll see it'll look a little different. And what this is it's kind of like TurboTax. It's guided questions. So one of the questions our behavioral health group gets a lot is, hey, I just graduated. What license do I need? We don't have to ask them that because the guided questions will help you get there. So like I said, we're trying to eliminate paper applications as much as possible. This third-party portal here is going to be beneficial in that respect because, especially for behavioral health, we still have a lot of forms that have to be done on paper, primarily supervision. Has to be reported to us on paper. So what this is it allows third-party users to engage with us without creating an Access Indiana account. So they'll be able to log in, tell us who the applicant is, give us the name and the applicant number, and then it'll get workflowed to the group through that. And it'll just be a secure file transfer. So we don't have to worry about security on our side, and it'll be easy for you guys to use on your side. And then long-term, we are looking into replacing our operating system. So as the administration kind of comes to an end, we want to make sure that we've got a new vendor at least selected. So that's something we're kind of early stages looking at. Reciprocity, compacts, and API implementation. These things are helpful for you for getting workers in from out of state, helpful for us because they kind of streamline our process a little bit, especially those API implementations. We've got, I think, 4 or 5 that we want to get done here within the next year or so. And those, I mean, they're great just because they're automatic. I mean, people don't have to look at them. It just, once somebody makes a change in the other system, it just automatically updates on our end. So it's fantastic. There'll be changes coming to reciprocity. I think in the behavioral health space, they're still debating what level of change is going to happen there, but I imagine it will be something will happen there. And then, of course, I think we've got the professional counselors compact that's moving through right now. And then I think next session, they're going to take on their stab at the social work. And then kind of internally, this goes along with the career path that I discussed earlier for our folks. Those senior licensing analyst positions, those replicate that strike force that I discussed earlier. So right now we've got licensing analysts and then we have middle management. There's nothing in between. So if you're a licensing analyst and you're good, you process more applications than your peers. We're going to be able to give you a raise. We're going to take you out of the group and we're going to cross train you on everything so that you've got a chance just to whatever kind of needs to be tackled, you can go in and just hit it. And the groups don't have to worry about staffing up for things like graduation season. And, if they get into big renewals, that kind of stuff, that really slows them down. So that'll be a permanent solution for that. If you would, next slide. As we talked about the call center, the one thing I haven't discussed there is we're trying to talk about what we can do in terms of like live chats and callback features just to make it a little easier for our users. We're going to be bringing on a webmaster as soon as we get into the new budget year that is going to look at our website. We're going to do some improved messaging and try to make the guidance a little more user friendly, just because right now I don't think on the whole our application instructions tend to be a little arcane and difficult to follow. So we want to make that a little easier for folks. And then for people who start applications with us, like last time I looked at it, it was about 15% of people who start an application, pay the fee, never actually complete the application. So we're going to set up a automated reminder system so that we'll just kind of keep pinging them with like, hey, here's the stuff you're missing, here's the stuff you're missing, here's the stuff you're missing, and they'll get that for a year until they roll out of our system. For those of you that are not aware, and Doug, if you're here, if you would put in the chat, that'd be awesome. We have a new Facebook page and a LinkedIn page for the agency where we are sharing information about renewals, about the public health emergency, any sort of announcements that we have, sharing board agendas and minutes, that sort of thing. So if you want to follow along with that, I think it'll be beneficial to you. You can find it on those. And again, Doug, if you would put some links in the chat for us. And then finally, we've got we're going to be bringing on a data analytics team to look at trends, both to help us prepare for surges and ebbs and flows in our workflows, so that we don't have hangups that are kind of driven just by volume. And then they'll be able to report out similar in the way the Bowen Center does on some of our license types that don't have that kind of support. So we're looking forward to starting that. If you would, next slide. Oh, that one. So on the post-licensure side, right now, it is done really ad hoc, just board by board by board, what they want to see and what they need. And, we treat lots of things that we see all the time, like DUIs, differently, just from board to board. So we want to get away from that, and we want to streamline a little bit more. So we are going to take all of our litigation staff from across the agency. I think we're going to bring in maybe one or two more positions to kind of round that out. And they will kind of serve like court clerks for the agency for every one of our boards. If you've got any sort of post-licensure stuff, you'll be engaging with them directly. And then the dream is to put this all online. So I don't know if you ever had a case that you've been watching on the Indiana My Case. We want to have something similar that you'll be able to follow along with any of our license litigation. So we've already started this with a few of our boards. We've got standardized case management plans. I think historically, AG's office files a complaint, and then there's a hearing. And depending on which board you have, it might be 2 months to your hearing, it might be 6 months to your hearing. There's really no standardization, and we really don't know if the case is going to happen or not. So it's disruptive on our end. So we've started doing case management plans like they do in real court that has deadlines for things like discovery and exchanges of witness and exhibit lists, and kind of lets you know when your hearing is going to be a few months out, so that we don't have like last minute scheduling things. So those have really been beneficial in nursing board where we started them, and we're going to roll those out eventually to behavioral health and all of our other boards. Every one of the boards, they don't know this yet, but we're going to ask them to work on disciplinary guidelines so that they've kind of got a standard punishment with things they consider to be aggregating, mitigating factors for discipline. So, if it's a DUI, like, is it your first DUI? Is it your second DUI? What was your blood alcohol content? That sort of thing. So they've got, they're not just addressing each case, on a case-by-case basis. And then finally, the one that I'm probably most excited about of any of these changes is we're going to be outfitting our boardroom with virtual meeting and audiovisual technology so that we can webcast those meetings. So you can watch virtually, you don't have to show up in the room. And that'll facilitate attendance by witnesses and board members virtually. If you would, next slide. And then probably, I would say this is the least sexy thing of the changes we're doing. But again, we are going to be looking at those career paths, creating those senior licensing analyst positions, kind of helps round that out. We're going to be centralizing training within that call center so that when folks get promoted out of the call center to licensing analyst, the board director and the assistant director aren't going to have to spend weeks training them. It could be a matter of days before they're ready to go. Our workspaces are a little outdated. I think most of the chairs in the agency were purchased when I was in high school, so we are going to be getting them new chairs, new cubes, just trying to make it a little more fresh down there. And again, that's important, trying to get people to stay and feel valued, and we really care that they're there. And then we're doing some increased employee engagement again, just to kind of help people feel welcome, make them feel like PLA is a place they can stay and build a career. Then a couple things that we had a modernization task force, the first meeting of which was last December, where we sought recommendations from our various stakeholder groups about things that we needed to do, perhaps we hadn't identified ourselves. The first of which was we have been slow on getting rules made, rules updated, especially in light of statutory changes. So we've now redone our internal policy for rulemaking so that everybody's kind of got defined roles, and that'll help us push things through. We've also partnered with the Office of Management and Budget, who, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the process, they're the ones that do the moratorium exception, which is kind of one of the big hangups. They're going to be helping us draft rules and help us draft our moratorium exception documents, which should make that process a little shorter as well. So we're hopeful with those two changes, our rulemaking, it's never going to be easy, but it'll be much easier, and we won't have things that are just kind of hanging out in limbo. Also, from the Modernization Task Force, we came to understand that folks really wanted us to have some more opportunities for informal guidance. So we're going to be doing 3 things on that front. The first is around criminal background checks. So if you've got somebody who's in high school or early on in college, it's really trying to plan out their career, and they're worried they've got a conviction on their record that's going to preclude them from ultimately being licensed, we are going to be creating a process by which they can disclose that to the board before they've even started along the path of becoming licensed, and make sure that that conviction isn't going to preclude them. Second, We are going to have a process by which, if there's a confusion about a statute or a rule, you can fill out a form on our website. PLA's legal team will look at that and provide feedback, and then ultimately we will discuss that with the board, and they will, adopt or modify the guidance as necessary. And then third, we are going to be working with the boards and the AG's office to develop a kind of living document for scope of practice, so that we've got some clear examples of what is and what is not within the scope of practice for our various professions. So I think that will help eliminate a lot of confusion, certainly other questions that I get around that. So we're still trying to figure out exactly what this process is going to look like, but I think we'll probably launch them here in the next couple months. So with that, I don't think I've got anything else. So if there's any questions or anything like that, I'm happy to answer. And
Yes.
Doug, give Dad.
Sorry, what's that, Evan?
Doug, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I will go ahead and just go back to the the discussions about that was touched on about reciprocity and compact implementation. Obviously, there will, as kind of Evan alluded to, there were some discussions about behavior in terms of ongoing discussions in the current legislative session about the behavioral health professions being rolled into the overarching reciprocity that was developed last year under IC 25-1-21. I just want this group to be aware that it's PLA's understanding and working with obviously the appropriate stakeholders and legislators that is likely not going to be something that we will see actually this session. Reciprocity for behavioral health will remain the same as it is in current law under IC 25-23.6. So you professionals don't need to necessarily worry about that. Your reciprocity processes will not change overall. I don't think we're really seeing any issues in the behavioral health space with the reciprocity applications, with the exception of obviously what kind of Evan pointed to, that final step of processing that written jurisprudence examination, which will go away. So I really, the only major difference in terms of the two different types of reciprocity methods is really that in the behavioral health space, you're required to provide your exam scores to us. And obviously that being a requirement because of the tests that each state requires across the country. Just wanted to provide everybody some relief. Don't expect any changes to reciprocity for behavioral health here this year.
Thanks, Doug. It's what I get for going on vacation. I lose track of these things.
It's all right. And obviously, as Evan pointed to, actually the professional licensure compact is actually being heard in committee today, House Public Health Committee today. So we will be monitoring that. There is no timetable in terms of, that we can provide at this time in terms of when PLA will be able to implement that. The General Assembly has, obviously put a lot on our plate over the last couple of years in terms of we have seen probably at least 5 or 6 different professional licensing compacts go through the Indiana General Assembly, which has put us into a tight spot in terms of implementation and processing those. But it, obviously, as Evan pointed to, that's something that will be among our focus as we enter the new fiscal year, trying to manage and implement more of these licensure compacts simultaneously. And obviously, we'll be working with the appropriate compact commissions, to obviously understand their capabilities in terms of making sure that we can implement things as quickly and efficiently as possible, but also not sacrifice our own existing processing at the same time. So stay tuned on professional counselor compact. We'll be providing additional information as it becomes available. Happy to answer any questions on that front.
Yes, thank you both. If anyone has any questions, I know it's a little past the hour now, but if anyone has any questions they wanted to type in the chat feature, raise your hand, just unmute yourself, give you a couple moments here.
I actually do have a quick question. So as you all know, we are competing nationwide for staff. There is such a crunch to get licensed professionals. And so I think we need to be very aware what the licensing process looks like in Indiana versus other states. My question really is, how do we get a voice to the Behavioral Health Board to help shape what our state's licensing process looks like, specifically in comparison with other states, so we don't make it more complicated for people to get licensed in Indiana, and therefore they just go, you know what, it's just not worth it. I'm just going to get a license in a neighboring state or somewhere else, which we see all of the time. So what is the process for us to get a voice on the board to be able to inform that licensing process?
So I'll take this one, Doug. That license requirement review is really what's going to be driving that in the future. That is not necessarily before the board yet. That is something that's on my plate personally. So what I would tell you is that if you have any thoughts around that, please send those to me, because that would be greatly helpful for me as I start putting that together.
Yeah, I'll just, say ditto to what Evan said. I mean, that is the process. Evan and I sit in a position where obviously our focus has to be on our own internal processes, but we all obviously have to look outward and have better information about what's going on across the rest of the country. So obviously any information that, you can get into IPLA leadership's hands to look into further, to get a better understanding of what is working across the country, and where Indiana is simply, not getting up to speed with the times. Those are certainly things that we are amenable to looking into.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question. Okay, maybe time for one more question. Anything burning for anybody? All right, Evan and Doug, thank you both so much. So as we wrap up, no surprise to anyone, I'm sure, Zoe has 5 slides of updates for me to read. So I'm just going to highlight the couple quick ones right now. The Senate budget will be out around April 13th. Then we will know what's in the budget for 988 and CCBHC. Until then, so as session is wrapping up, we are going to be doing legislative briefings every Monday at 10 a.m. So if you don't have that email, shoot me an email and I'll make sure you have that login and Zoom information. Coming up, we have our May 2nd Cup of Joe with Zoe with Kathy Cook Aspen. We have an April 10th PHE MCE update. And I'll wrap up with this. May 1st and 2nd, Zoe will be in LA for NatCon. So we will more than likely be doing another Dunkin' with Denise in May. So this might become an ongoing thing. Oh, and also, yes, please save the date for May 11th and 12th, our spring conference. We're going to be in Plainfield, Indiana. So save the date on that. And let's go ahead, do a nice little Dunkin' cheers. Everyone. Oh, and finally, yes, sorry, most importantly, Mary Roby, you are the winner of this month's Starbucks gift card. Congratulations. Yes. So cheers. Although I should probably make it a Dunkin' gift card. We can keep it Starbucks. Cheers. Everyone enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.